What's up guys, this is Cher talking, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'll be making a full review for the Romancing Festival Razem banner that brings the most hyped character of recent times, Razem. This wolf character that can buff, heal, and bring defense boost. There's a lot of things that this guy can do. And there is also other characters like Hardy, that is a direct damage dealer that also decreases indirect damage to the party. Hiveris, a counter specialist with slash and cold damage, and Esper Gal, a rogue farmer. And now we are here on rsrs.xyz website where we can check characters' status and skills. And let's start with Razem. He gives a name to the banner. He is a hybrid, a martial artist that also needs the holy element imbued in the weapon, but in this event we are getting one that has 90% damage increase. It's insane how easy it is to build this character. He also has high agility, intelligence, and STR. Not very high, but just good enough because he's in hybrid. Then his endurance and will kind of suffer a little, not being that high, but being okay. Love and charisma are also on the average levels because he can also heal. Moving on, this character actually looks like he is using an axe. Why is he a martial artist? Game? Don't know. So, I think it makes sense to start talking about passives. Voltage Force 2, on the start of a turn, grants himself a heat up that increases damage potential by 20%, and it triggers up to 5 times per battle, meaning that by turn 5 you have 100% damage increase for the whole fight. By the end of a turn, also recovers 2 BP. The second one is called Merciful Ruler. When attacking with skill attacks, it will buff all surviving allies' STR, dexterity, agility, and intelligence by 15%. Well, if you know, all the status are offensive ones. Agility can also allow you to evade sometimes, although it's very hard to do this in current game. You are increasing the potential of all your characters' damage. So, offensive buffs that will allow you to do more damage. But when attacking with spell attacks, it will buff all surviving allies, endurance, and will instead by 15%. So, will buffs are very welcome because they will decrease magical attacks damage, but also prevent ailments and debuffs. Endurance will just reduce physical damage. Sometimes you may prefer to use skills, sometimes you may prefer to use spells. You can actually use any of those with different builds with Razem. Also, by the end of every 5 turns, counting from the start of battle, that means turn 5, 10, 15, beyond, you will recover 1 usage of a skill called Merciful Light. That is actually a spell, and this is very important. I'll be talking more about later. Then we have Primal Beast. Damage increases at all time by 20%. When attacked, damage will be reduced by 30% as well, so this is his damage reduction passive. By the start of battle, he will also grant all surviving allies blind devotion for the whole fight. This is something very crazy. When landing an attack, they will have this new effect that will debuff endurance and will from targets by 5%. It's a guarantee. It's not related to chance. So, when you debuff the enemy endurance, you do more physical damage. If you debuff their will, you do more magical damage, but also you increase your chance to apply debuffs and ailments. But there's also a problem with this. Some bosses will have a dare zone where they will check if you debuff them too much, and if you did, they will trigger Defy Weakness to remove all debuffs, even others that were important. For example, debuffs to intelligence that you want to apply sometimes to decrease the damage that you receive. And when using Razem, you will also be debuffing those values by quite a lot. Imagine using Leon with 6 bullets. He will debuff endurance will by 30% alone. So, you have to pay attention to boss behavior because of this. But also, as a penalty, when you are attacking, you will also debuff your own love and charisma by 5%. So, multi-hit attackers will also take a big hit from this, but he himself can fix this problem by the second part of the passive. When he attacks with either skills or spells, Relief Zone will be activated with 50% chance. This Relief Zone is a single target attack with Sun and Blunt damage, has S power, and it will remove all debuffs applied to your party. That's right, 50% of the time, you can simply remove all love and charisma debuffs, and it will also buff will by 15% because it's being used as a passive. So you fix problems and you even buff will. That's better than buffing endurance most of the time. So, there's a lot of good things to say just looking on the passives of this character, right? But moving on, let's talk about skills. The first one is called White Wolf Strike. It's a martial arts skill, so it will be using both STR and agility. It has the power and blunt and slash damage that will recover HP by around 220 and grant himself a guard-up smile that decreases damage taken by 12% and lasts for 2 turns. It's not an important attack, it's just so that you can actually have a cycle and you will heal a little. Maybe if he's in danger, this can help, but it's not important. And then the second skill is actually a spell, call it Merciful Light. This is a full AoE attack with C power and only 5 VP cost, that's good. And it will recover all surviving allies' HP by small effect. That is the same thing as UA Light. It does not revive, it will only heal people that are already alive, and 1,200 HP on base is actually very nice. It will also grant all surviving allies at end of turn recover about 220, and that lasts for 2 turns, the same turn where you applied and the next one. So, you have a higher healing than Silver Light when you consider the extra region. By costing only 5 VP, you can always use this skill no matter what. You started a turn, you always have 5 because you got 5 VP back by the end of the past turn, allowing him to heal on any situation. But this comes with just 2 usages per battle in JP. In Global, he got that change where every 5 turns he will get another usage of this skill. But can he be your main healer? It depends. Well, in some boss fights that only last for like 10 turns and the enemy don't do very high damage. Let's say that you heal on turn 3, then again on turn 6, and then again on turn 9. Well, you will be able to just use Razem, especially if you have someone else buffing love and charisma to heal better. And, well, you will not need a main healer besides him. Remember that when you are using Merciful Light, you will trigger an Endurance and Will buff, and you will have a 50% chance to use Relief Zone and buff that again by another 15%. So, you will just increase your sustain as well, reducing damage taken. So, very nice to use as a secondary option, but can still use it as your main heal in some scenarios where bosses don't do crazy damage. If they do, Razem will just be your secondary healer. Now moving on, the third skill is called Resonant Radiant Blade. Well, it's a single target attack with slash and sun damage, and it will grant all surviving allies attack boost before he even attack. That increases damage potential by 20% and lasts for 2 turns. Then he attacks with S power that feels like a double S power attack. That may not feel like it's super strong, but it also grants all surviving allies defense boost that decreases damage taken by 25% and lasts for 2 turns. Okay, minus 25% is higher than Scrumguard, so it's a character that will heal, can decrease damage taken, and can buff status. And when you are using him on a boss fight, if you open with Resonant Radiant Blade, you increase the damage of all your characters, he will apply defense, and will already start buffing offensive status, that is STR, Dexterity, Agility, and Intelligence by 15%. All changes will just focus on Endurance and Will. So, when you use White Wolf Strike, you keep buffing STR, Dexterity, Agility, and Intelligence. So, eventually, it will scale to become good offensively, and since he has a perfect cycle of Resonant Radiant Blade on turn 1, White Wolf Strike in turn 2, and so on, you can actually increase the damage potential of your party by a good amount. It still does not beat what you get from other buffers like Muse and Matriarch, if they are buffing characters that get full value of their buffs. But to be honest, Razem was not made to be your main buffer. He was not. He actually combos well with any other main buffer, especially Muse. They were made to be used together. Muse has that skill that buffs both STR, Intelligence, Will, and Love. She just doesn't buff Dexterity. So if you are using STR or Intelligence-based damage dealer with Razem and Muse on the same team, you have minus 20% from her passive, minus 25% damage from Razem, and you will be buffing offensive status to just keep increasing your damage output. Bosses can sometimes buff break, but they are not as common as bosses that use Defy Weakness. And Muse also can heal if you get into a desperate moment where you will need to heal twice or something. Well, those two characters together will replace a main healer, especially if you are using them together with BP generation. And that's something that I like to use. People like, for example, Socho. He gives a lot of VP to the party by use of his Let Me Handle It. That will give 10 points of BP in this skill that has delay. So with the extra BP, you can actually choose to keep using Razem for the skill number 3. That's right, you will not need to cycle skill 3 to skill 1. If you have enough BP, if you use Resonant Radiant Blade 2 times in a row, you grant yourself 2 defense boosts, decreasing damage taken by 25 and then another 25 multiplicatively. Well, that will also allow you to sometimes use Merciful Light without losing BP. There is another character that also works super well with this, and it's Faldor. Faldor I have been using together with both characters, and he's actually helping quite a lot because he will decrease the BP cost of Razem skill 3 to 7 because of his high spirit E pawn, and he will decrease the buff BP cost of Muse from 5 to 3, allowing her to have a surplus that will allow her to heal wherever she wants. BP batteries will also help Razem perform his second role, become a full endurance and wheel buffer. Well, we do have Beauty that is just the same thing, but she can also heal the party in the end of a turn and when she's buffing. But if you want, Razem can do similarly. In that case, you will lose the defense boost and the attack boost. I don't really like this idea, but maybe you need extra wheel buffs. What you can do is inherit Relief Zone from his Welfare style. And with use of BP batteries, you can actually use this more times, because by itself is too costly. 7 BP is a little too much. He only gets 5 per turn. That will lead him to sometimes not having enough to cast Relief Zone. But when he casts this on level 99, he will buff Will by 25%. His passive will then buff both Endurance and Will by another 15% for a total of 40% Will buff and 15% Endurance buff. You still have a 50% chance to chase with another Relief Zone that will allow you to buff Endurance by a total of 30% and Will by a total of 55%. Now imagine being capable of using Relief Zone every single turn, and when you need to heal, you just switch to Merciful Light, so that you are just casting spells with your Razem. It leads to some interesting strategies that will help avoid being inflicted with ailments or decrease magical damage from bosses that nuke you all the time, right? But I still prefer to keep his Resonant Radiant Blade even as it is, because we have an attack boost, we have this defense boost, and we will all be buffing offensive status, STR, Dexterity, Agility, and Intelligence, and sometimes, occasionally, 50% of the time, we'll buff Endurance and Will by 15%. But that is if you already have a main buffer in your team. If Razem is trying to be your main buffer, it will be better for him to just keep using spells. That's what I believe. Besides, for inheritance, we have Brilliance Blade, that is a AoE attack with Slash and Sun, that has a chance to debuff Will from enemies. Because his intelligence is pretty high, this could be used somewhere in the future if you need to apply ailments, but it's usually just unnecessary. He also has this attack called White Knight Slash, that is full AoE with Slash and Sun damage that costs 15 BP. So he can actually use this on the second turn for very strong damage, but I don't think you're gonna use this too much since he's not made for nuking. Although he does very respectable damage after self-buffing, buffing the party, he can actually contribute to damage. Well, Razem is a special unit that kind of changes how we fight versus our challenges. He tries to replace some other characters that we have been using, like Witch's Daughter. Witch's Daughter was the best secondary buffer in the game recently because she can buff all status, and she can do that by 40% when on overdrive or 25% when not, and she can give VP to the party. But the thing is, if you already have a stronger VP generation in your party from people like Valdor and Socho, and in the future Shirei, you will not need to give VP to them. And you are kind of buffing almost all status as well with Razem, and Razem has defense boost, something that you would not find on Witch's Daughter. And Witch's Daughter was already replacing other secondary buffers, like Normal's Daughter. So the game is improving and characters are getting more effects in order to replace old styles. Another buffer that is considered a secondary one is Maria, because she cannot buff every turn, but she has an ailment buff that will allow you to resist some fights where you cannot simply buff Will. Sometimes you may actually want to use them together and use them as they are, ignoring a buffer that can buff every turn, because they both give defense boost. In her case, it's via Scrum Guard, decreasing damage taken by 20% as long as everyone is alive, and she buffs all status, so it's also another way to just reduce damage taken while also offering buff to offensive status. Razem totally deserves an OP grade in our tier list by being capable of offering so much to any account. New players will benefit from him a lot. He is the best starting unit, and veterans will still find lots of different combinations to use Razem with, even if they already have all buffers released so far. That's how good this guy is, and you'll not regret if you pull for him. Well, Razem got a recent style on JP where he actually has some interesting skills. He has now a free attack that buffs STR and intelligence, so you don't need to use the first skill from Welfare or Premium. He also has this other skill that has damage and also casts this passive where he will get attack boost and recover BP when an ally is attacked, so that he can actually grant himself lots of BP to keep using spells and keep with his defensive build instead of the offensive one. And he also has this very strong 4S attack for Nuke. You can still use them together because this one here is more of a damage dealer than the Wolf version that is more of a support. This version of him can achieve very high damage because he can get 200% damage increase from weak attacks, and he also chases with different attacks as well. The next character is Hardy, wearing Colossus, and he is a martial artist even though he looks to be using an axe. What does this game has against axe users? I don't know, man. We could have two very good ones. He is not a hybrid even though his weapon has the earth element. He has the highest STR in the game with 130%, that's insane, with 115% agility as well. So his damage is gonna explode, and he does have respectable endurance and will on 90% for a damage dealer. Those values are very good. And he still has some dexterity by inheritance of his welfare style, that is actually a axe user. Love is very low and charisma is just okay. Moving on for passives, the first one is called Warrior's Pride. On the start of battle, recovers BP by 10 points, that's insane. And he will grant all surviving allies fair and square, but also all surviving enemies as well. What is fair and square? Okay, this will increase all direct attacks damage by 75%. And when attacked by indirect attack, it reduces damage taken by 25%. So, this goes both ways. That means that you will be increasing all direct attacks damage in that fight, yours or the enemy's, and reducing all indirect attack in that fight, yours or the enemy. So, if you want to use Hardy, you want to bring direct damage dealers. He is one himself. And you want to use all your characters versus a boss that has no direct attacks, only or mostly indirect ones, because you are getting two effects here. Yeah, you are increasing the damage and reducing damage taken. This is awesome. It does not work all the time, but when it works, it's amazing. There is also a formation called Moscow Road that increases direct damage by another 75%, and it was made to use with your RD. That one also decreases direct damage, so you kinda can compensate if the enemy has a hybrid design, so it's an interesting character that can offer some very different utility. Now, passive number 2, Insatiable Spirit. Attack increases by 30%, and by the start of a turn, he will buff STR, Endurance, Agility, and Will by 15%. That's right, he keeps self-buffing for offense and defense to increase damage and reduce damage taken. Then we have Mighty Warrior. Attack damage increases by 20%, and when attacked, damage will be reduced by 30%, and when attacked by an attack that will cause resist, damage taken will then be reduced by 40%. Okay, so he has a 30% at all times, and then an extra 40% if you get resist, and if it's an indirect attack, he will also decrease it by 30%. That's right, so you have way too many defensive capabilities with this guy. He just won't easily die, especially because he keeps self-buffing. A very interesting design for a character that is, well, a damage dealer. The first skill is called a 3-step punch. This is a single target attack with B power that, well, buffs STR, Endurance, and Agility by up to 25% on max level. This is good. It will allow him to just actually do enough damage to keep using this forever, because he actually has a problem with BP generation. Skill number 2 is called Punching My Way. It's a triple S attack that deals blunt damage, and it will remove all buffs from the enemy. So it's buff break like we have with Dark Wash and Rising Nova Plus. And then he attacks after removing all buffs. It's nice because that means if a boss have buffed Endurance, that will not affect his damage performance because he will cleanse that. For just 8 PP, it's also nice, it does not have delay, especially because he's a martial artist. But this selling point is his skill number 3, call it Mighty Martial Strike. It also does remove all buffs from an enemy before attacking, and before attacking he will also give himself an attack boost that increases damage potential by 50% for that particular turn, and then he launches a 4S attack. This skill costs 15 BP, that's a little too much, right? But he can actually use this on turn 1. Remember that he starts with 20? Yes, and he has 30% damage increase alongside status buff. This attack can easily do more than 500,000 damage with a maxed hardy and full promotion. It's explosive. That's even higher than the damage that you can achieve with Leon with his first attack and 2 bullets. You need 3 bullets with Leon to break through the damage of Mighty Martial Strike. But of course, he can only use this on turn 1. On turn 2, he can still use Punching My Way to do around 300,000 damage, but after that, he's locked into using 3-step punch. It will do very good damage though, because he keeps buffing himself from passive, from the skill itself, and this will feel stronger than it looks, but you will never be able to nuke again easily unless you have BP batteries like Valdor, like Socho, Syrah in the future, or other people like Bertrand and Rouge that can use Blooming Fireworks. But Blooming Fireworks does not give as much, it will still take time to give enough to nuke again. Maybe you can actually just use Punching My Way on turn 1, I don't know, and then keep using 3-step punch, and when you reach overdrive, use Mighty Martial Strike after buffing yourself so many times. This guy can break through 1 million, much like Sadwin. Now, he has inheritance options from his welfare style. There is Dimensional Break that can be used in the next Siegfried Remembrance battle because he can instant kill targets. I know his intelligence is terrible, but it doesn't matter, this is enough to work in Remembrance. And he also has Spiral Blade that is a full AoE attack with slash and blunt damage that can be used twice by himself because he starts with 20 BP. But he cannot use it 3 times though. And sadly, this attack is indirect, so if you are using with his main style, it will not benefit from his passive that increases direct damage by 75%. So it may still farm some events in solo, but it's unlikely. You will need someone else's helps. But those are the inheritance that matter. The other ones don't matter too much. Of course, people will say, okay, Hardy will compete with two very strong damage dealers. Those are Leon. Yes, Leon is an indirect attacker, so they can still be used on different squad setups. The third version of Leon has 2 bullets by turn 1 already, so his damage is actually very good, and he can also apply damage block to himself. Very good, but Leon needs dexterity buffs, and those are a little harder to find now since the best prime buffers are more about STR now. So, another very strong damage dealer that can be used is Silver. Silver, UDX style, is very good on doing blunt damage with Sia, rowing, dragon kick, that feels like a 4S attack, and she can get chains attacks and lead to using Sia, rowing, dragon kick every 2 turns. So damage is good, and well, she's also very good defensively, and they also require the same types of buffs. But Hardy does have this mechanic of decreasing damage taken from indirect attacks. That means that he has an edge. Sometimes he may be the best in slot for blunt damage if you have other companions that can also do direct damage. Imagine using him together with people like Mirza that have left fork, that is a direct attack that hits 5 times. There are situations where you want this guy instead of the other options. He's not a mandatory style to have, but a very good one that will receive a triple S grade in our tier list. RG has a future style on JP that got released recently. People are having fun with this one. He is back on using Axis, and he is a type of BP regenerator for the party, including himself. Well, he has a free attack that gives BP if you want to fix his martial arts style. He can also heal and give BP, including himself if you want, but can only use it 2 times. And he has this nuke attack that has only SS power, costs 17 BP, but gives a random value to all surviving allies by 1 to 10 BP. He starts the fight giving a 5 BP maximum increase. He also has a similar setup where he just applies increase to direct attacks, decrease to indirect attacks, but they look to be of smaller value than in his martial arts style, and can also recover a lot of BP passively by the end of a turn with 4 different chances. That's right, all of them can trigger just one of them, so he's actually a very effective BP generator and works well with Sheree in the future as well. So the character has a good future, I'm sure. The next character is Hiveris, and he has just 104% STR, 108% intelligence, and those are the same values for endurance and will as well. As you can see, he's a hybrid, he's also a tank, and he needs to survive well. That allows him to suffer from low agility and just okay love and charisma. But he does have some tricks on his sleeve. Moving 4 passes, we have Armored Shell. By the start of a turn, he grants himself a defense up that decreases damage taken by 15% for the whole fight and can trigger 5 times per battle. And he will also grant himself 1 damage block for 1 time, 1 turn. That means that the first hit will never do damage against himself. And on overdrive attacks, he will grant himself, also when he attacks on overdrive, he grants himself a hit up of 50% increase in damage for the whole fight, can trigger 3 times per battle. By the end of a turn, he also charges OD Gouge by 25 points. Unusual, this guy will get into overdrive every 2 turns or 3 at most, but usually 2 turns. That will allow him to actually just get into his max potential by around turn 6 or 7. The second pass is called Ice Flower Veil. When being directly attacked, he will counter with Ice Flower Dance 50% of the time. The skill will only trigger on rank 1, but it doesn't really matter. This attack here, Ice Flower Dance, it's a skill that hits between 3 to 5 times. If you hit 3 times, it's already considered triple S power. If you hit 5 times, equal to 4S power. All hits are of E power, but they aren't slash and code, and this skill when used on rank 1 barely matters because E power attacks barely increase when you rank them up. So the attack is good, and the problem is that it's just a 50% chance to counter. Then on the start of a turn, he will buff his own ailment resistance by very large effect. I don't know how much that actually changes, but in a game, well, if all your characters are protected, then good. If just one, it's not really important. And he also recovers 2 VP, so he is a 5 VP per turn character. Then we have protective healing. When attacked, damage will be reduced by 30%, and by the end of a turn, we recover HP by around 220. This character didn't even need this damage reduction passive because of already having 5 stacks of 15% defense up. He won't take much damage, he actually has very good sustain. Now, he does not have any other damage increase besides the heat up that he gets from overdrive. That can be a problem, but well, at least he takes 2 turns on average to get in overdrive. Now, for skills, we have Flying Aqua Blade. That's actually a spell that will use his intelligence, much like the skill number 3, and it will just attack random enemies. You cannot choose a target 1 or 2 times. The damage will be similar to a normal attack, but if you get 2 hits, it's similar to 8 power, just so you know. It's free, so nothing wrong can come of this. The second skill is Ice Flower Dance, like I just said. This is actually a sword skill, so it's based on STR, and it hits between 3 to 5 times with Slashing Cold. Usually this type of attack costed like 10 BP, then it got reduced to 9 when we got Polka, and then it's now 8. It's good, but I still prefer to have a guaranteed damage, and 8 PP for triple S power, it's kinda very common these days. Skill number 3 is Zero Absolute. It's a spell again, it's a fast attack that will hit all enemies with Cold and Slash. It can only be used once per battle, and it will grant all surviving allies a full defense up that decreases damage taken by 15%. That's right, everyone. So, this is actually close to Scrum Guard. And then, when the attack lands, he will grant all enemies hit down that will decrease their damage potential by 5%. Now we are talking. That's very similar to Scrum Guard now. Minus 15, minus 5. And it still does damage, but his damage before he reaches overdrive is actually pretty bad. You could actually just start the fight with Zero Absolute so that you can decrease incoming damage. In turn 1, it's dangerous sometimes since you do not have your buffs or debuffs applied. But then after that, he would just keep using Flying Aqua Blade till he has enough to use Ice Flower Dance and relying on triggering his counter with Ice Flower Dance as well. The problems with Hiveris are, his damage is limited on start, he does not taunt, and there are other competitors for the role. Like for example Bertrand. Bertrand, in his Global Axis style, will counter with his skill called Twin Goldfish. That is Column, has S power, but grants attack and defense boosts that last for 3 turns, and they will stack so much. He also buffs his own intelligence when he gets hit. He does not taunt as well, but when we use this character, we sometimes bring trash units so that they can die, and Bertrand will solo. That's right, he will solo. Hiveris can solo, but he only counters with 50% chance. That's the same case with School Bertrand. But School Bertrand, it's actually sometimes just better use it as a full damage dealer, and you take that counter as a secondary role. See? There is also Ice Cream Galahad. That is another type of counter unit. This time, full Slashing Cold. And you can actually use him with that Inheritance Freeze Spike, that when you cast, it will counter every hit with Freeze Spike. And you can actually cast this 3 times in a row, depending on how much BP you store it, and you do insane amounts of damage. It's 3 hits of B power, not E power. And Galahad will never die because every time that he hits the enemy, he self-heals. Just like Bertrand. That's not something that happens with Hiveris. He actually only heals by the end of a turn, although he will barely take damage anyway. But those are different situations, and all of them clash with Hiveris. And not just Hiveris, there is an upcoming unit that is the newest for news, that is also a counter unit for cold damage, so it's even more competition for a character that, well, actually in the end, does not offer as much. The good thing about him is that skill tree that will give defense up to everyone and decrease damage taken from enemies, so barely takes damage. But it may take many turns for him to kill enemies. The good thing is that he can also be used to solo because he grants ailment resistance. That means that he does not need to buff will, like some of those other counters can actually stop working if they get inflicted with ailments. So there's that. But for those that have at least one of those I mentioned, it's just way too much to have so many counter units, because on one of them is enough, because they clear content. Why would you actually beat the same stage with 3 different counters? Just showcasing, right? Nothing besides that. Besides, he can also inherit Ice Pillars, that is a support fast self skill that gives him a defense boost for 1 turn, decreasing damage taken by 25%, and Guard Up Medium that decreases by another 25%, but this time it lasts for 5 turns. His other skills makes no sense to me when using with this version, because they are either costly or they don't have the elements that I actually want, and he is just made to be used as a counter unit anyway. There's some potential here, but just like Syrah, it's not important to have Hiveris. He is locked into an SS Plus grade now, and in the future we'll see a downgrade as well. Well, Hiveris has a new style on JP where he tries to be a counter debuffer. That's right, he can debuff by use of active skills, but he can also debuff by being hit. Different types of elemental attacks will trigger different effects. He can debuff agility, STR, and even intelligence of enemies, but it's related to the elements that they are attacking with, so it needs to match 2 different things. It's kind of a strange character, to be honest. The last character is Esper Gal, and she is now a farmer. That's right, 118 intelligence and 105 agility are not even that great to begin with. Endurance and will are just okay, with some okay love and charisma as well. For passives, we have Supergirl. On the start of a turn, she grants herself a heat up, increasing damage potential by 15% for the whole fight, can trigger as much as 3 times per battle. She also recovers 3 BP every turn for 3 times, for a max of 9 BP generated between 3 turns. The second passive is called Weakness Assault, and when attacking weak targets, she gets a 30% increase in damage. By the start of a round, she also gets a 50% increase in damage. Then we have Offensive Spirit 1. When attacking weak targets, damage increases by 20%, and by the end of a turn, she recovers 1 BP. So, in the end, she actually gets as much as... Her second passive is called Weakness Assault 5. Weak attack damage increases by 30%, and that on start of round she gets a 30% damage increase as well. Then Offensive Spirit 1 guarantees another 20% increase when attacking weak targets, and she recovers 1 BP by the end of a turn. So she actually can generate some good enough BP to use some skills, and we'll see an increase in damage by a total of at least 95% on turn 1, then 110% on turn 2, and 125% on turn 3. Moving for our skills, the first one is called Cure Fire. This is a heat attack, single target with just E power and 1 BP cost that recovers HP by around 1.2 thousand. This is actually not good to be used with this character because, as you have seen, she has 0 damage reduction. It's actually an inheritance bot to use with her Halloween style that is actually very nice if you have it, so that you can actually just self-heal when needed. Moving on, skill number 2 is called Lost Flare. That is a row attack that has heat and shadow, only 8 PP cost, and deals double S power. Well, it's not fast, but you can use Dragon's Tense Axe formation if you want, and she can actually attack 3 times in a row to farm story or any sort of event. Will she be able to solo content? I guess so. Not all content though. Some events she will have enough power, some others one she won't. The good thing is that Lost Flare also has shadow damage. That means that if Saruin is in your party, she's gonna do a little more damage as well. But Lost Flare is actually more useful for farming anyway. The third spell, Dark Burn. It's a single target with heat and shadow that has double S power as well. But this time it's fast and will grant the enemy guard down medium, decreasing their defenses by 25%. Then defense down medium, decreasing it by another 25%. And then applying a heat defense down. That can decrease up to 35% resistance to fire element. All these debuffs only last for one turn, and they only apply after she had attacked. So even though you have lots of things here, well, it could have helped it if it was before she attacked. But all characters would take benefit of that minus 25 and minus 25 defense because they stack. It's kind of like using Morale Up Extreme that will increase your potential by 50% for that turn only. So she does generate some BP, but again, she's not useful in boss fights. You could use this on raids though. If you have a very strong heat attacker, it can actually help a lot. But it's simply not really applicable besides farming or raids. You can though inherit this Dark Burn into her Halloween style again, because this style here can be used in boss fights, has damage reduction, has better status distribution, and if you are using other heat attackers, it's gonna help. But it also works when you will bring someone like Saruin. Imagine Saruin attacking after you debuff it defense 2 times by 25%. It's also funny that Dark Burn is actually the reverse of Dimensional Aura. Remember in the first UDX Esper Gal, she has this fast attack that is also heat and shadow with double S power, but it will instead give you guard up, medium, full defense boost that decreases full damage by 35, and shadow defense boost that decreases it by another 35. But again, you kind of have to choose boss fights where they use cold or shadow damage, and it's just for one turn, hard to use. Same thing as with Dark Burn. It's kind of a waste though, and there's nothing here that helps her much. You could just inherit Haunted Pumpkin if you wanted, but she will only be able to use it on turn 1 and on turn 3. She can inherit Witch Streak and attack 3 times in a row with triple S power. So if there's just one target, this can actually work. But in the end, the character as it is, it's just to give inheritance options to the Halloween version, or to act as a farmer when enemies are aligned in a row. You will find competition though, because, well, there is Leonard, Weird style, that has a row attack as well, that is slash in heat. So in the heat department, you have competition. He can also attack 3 times in a row, but he needs to kill a target. Damage will be similar though. And there is also Gathered in the older banner, from Creator's banner. You can also attack 3 times in a row, but his attack is actually triple S power because his passives are weaker. But it's Slash and Sun. Okay, they are different elements, but enemies that are weak to Sun are sometimes weak to Heat as well. So you can choose whatever character. And in the end, none of them are actually worked. If you get them by accident, okay. If you don't care much about it. Well, Esper Gal, although very similar to Gathered, still offers a little less since Gathered has different types of cycles. So I believe that he may deserve a SS Plus, while Esper Gal stays with a plain SS grade. The next Esper Gal from JP is actually pretty interesting. She has Void Plus that will buff her intelligence when attacking, but she has this skill called Psychic Hunt that costs 6 BP and applies defense boost medium effect. The skill is fast, so it will always apply before enemy attack, reducing damage taken by 25%, but she also grants this passive that will recover 1 BP when you are hit by magical attacks, that triggers up to 3 times, and she can also use this skill as a chase with 50% chance. She has good damage by stacking hit ups in the long fights, so she has a very good future for boss fights. But now back to the banner image. Is this banner worth summoning for? In my opinion, yes. I gave it a gold minus award and I pull it here as well. We have Razem, a boss specialist that can buff, can heal, and apply defense boosts. He is a jack of all trades and can easily fit in many different squads that can change the way he operates for different roles. And he just received an OP grade in the tier list. And then we have Hardy, that is such an interesting damage dealer with explosive damage and can help increase your direct damage and decrease indirect damage. It's just like adding a formation on top of your own to get a lot of different effects. But I believe those two are the best characters in this banner. We don't need to go after Hiveris or Esper Gal. They kind of work for what they were designed for, but it's just that they clash with many other units and it's not worth to pull for them unless you really like or are missing out on what they offer. If you summon here and get Razem in the first or second multi-pull, I would suggest you to stop. Hardy is good, but it may still lead you to a pity. But if you are already invested in the banner when you get your Razem, I do believe it's worth to go for Hardy. He is just that good. But it's not worth to go for Hiveris or Esper Gal. You should just get them by accident and use them if you get, but forget about them eitherwise. But that's my opinion. What is yours? Please say here in the comment section. I already pulled it, got all of the characters but needed to pity. The last one was Hardy, but I felt like it was worth. I'm having fun with both Hardy and Razem. But what do you think about this all? I hope you had better luck than I hope you had a better luck than me. Please say here in the comment section. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't. If you want to support the channel, we have links on the description. And don't forget to join our Discord server, where we talk about romancing SaGa universe and other JRPGs in general. Hope to see you soon in the next video or live stream. Bye.